Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching the gas giant below spin slowly in the darkness. The massive research station was home to 50,000 beings from 12 different alien races, all working together on projects that would help make dead worlds come alive. Jake commanded the human section of the station, which was small compared to the others. Only 200 humans lived here among thousands of aliens. His wife Lisa worked in the science labs, studying alien life forms that most humans had never seen. Their 8-year-old son, Tommy, spent his days exploring the station's long corridors and making friends with alien children, whose names Jake could barely pronounce. The boy had a gift for understanding creatures that others found scary or strange. The peace of the morning was broken when alarms began screaming throughout the station. Jake's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the bridge. A transport ship was under attack by pirates near the station. The ship was carrying important cargo to a high-security prison world. Jake ran to the command center where Commander Veltar, a tall blue-skinned Corvan warrior, was coordinating the response. The transport ship appeared on the main screen, smoke pouring from its hull. Small pirate ships buzzed around it like angry wasps. "The transport is not responding to our calls," Veltar said, his voice deep and worried. "We are sending rescue ships now." Jake watched as the station's rescue vessels moved toward the damaged transport. But something went wrong. An explosion rocked the transport ship, and the cargo bay doors flew open. Something dark and massive shot out into space, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. "What was in that cargo hold?" Jake asked. Veltar's face went pale, which was hard to see on blue skin, but Jake had learned to read alien expressions over the years. "The transport manifest says it was carrying a Zirathi Warbeast to the prison world," Veltar whispered. Every alien in the command center suddenly became very quiet. Jake had heard stories about Zirathi Warbeasts, but he thought they were just legends. The Zirathi race had died out 10,000 years ago, but they had created creatures that were perfect killing machines. These beasts were 12 feet tall, covered in armor that could stop energy weapons, and had 6 arms with claws that could tear through starship metal. The thing that had escaped from the transport was heading straight for Kepler Station. On the screen, Jake could see it clearly now. It looked like a nightmare made real. Its body was covered in dark metal plates that seemed to grow from its skin. 6 powerful arms ended in claws longer than swords. Its head was full of teeth that could bite through anything. "All security teams to alert status," Veltar commanded. "Seal the docking bays. Prepare for boarding action." But they were too late. The Warbeast crashed through the station's outer hull like it was made of paper. Emergency lights flashed red as the creature tore through the docking bay. The first security team to meet it was made up of Corvan warriors, the best fighters in the galaxy. They lasted 30 seconds. Jake ran through the corridors toward his family's quarters. Around him, the station was falling into chaos. The Warbeast was moving through the halls, and every time security forces tried to stop it, they failed. Energy weapons that could melt through tank armor barely scratched its hide. The creature seemed to know what they would do before they did it. He found Lisa in their quarters, packing emergency supplies while trying to stay calm for Tommy. The boy sat on his bed, playing with a small toy ship, but Jake could see he was scared. Outside their door, they could hear screaming and the sound of metal being torn apart. "We need to get to the evacuation area," Jake said, grabbing more supplies. Lisa nodded and picked up Tommy. The family joined a stream of civilians heading for the central hub, where escape pods waited. But as they moved through the corridors, reports came over the communication system that made Jake's blood run cold. The Warbeast had defeated Champion Krexta, the strongest warrior on the station. It had resisted the mind control attempts of the Menthari psychics, creatures who could make others obey with just a thought. Even the heavy weapons team from the Draconis military, with guns that could destroy buildings, had failed to slow it down. Jake realized that this creature was not just strong or fast, it was smart. It was learning from each fight, getting better at defeating whatever the station threw at it. The beast was hunting the strongest defenders first, as if it wanted to prove was the most dangerous thing on the station. The Morrison family reached the central hub just as the last group of security forces fell back. The hub was a massive open space in the center of the station, with shops and restaurants where people from different worlds could meet and trade. Now it was filled with frightened civilians from a dozen different species. Commander Veltar was there, organizing the evacuation. But his expression was grim. "The escape routes are blocked," he announced. "The creature has positioned itself to cut off our exit paths. We are trapped." Jake looked around at the faces in the crowd. There were proud Corvin warriors who had never known defeat, wise Menthari elders who could read minds, and tough Draconis soldiers who had fought in 100 wars. All of them looked afraid. The sound of metal being torn apart grew closer. The Warbeast was coming. Jake pulled his family close as the creature appeared at one of the hub entrances. Up close, it was even more terrifying than on the security screens. It moved with the grace of a natural predator, but its size and armor made it seem unstoppable. Its 6 arms moved independently, each one capable of crushing a person with ease. The beast walked slowly into the hub, as if it had all the time in the world. It looked around at the gathered civilians with intelligence that was almost human. This was not a mindless animal. This was a thinking creature that enjoyed the fear it created. The crowd pressed back against the far wall, but there was nowhere to run. The Warbeast had cornered them perfectly. It raised its 6 arms, claws gleaming in the emergency lighting, and prepared to finish what it had started. Jake held Lisa and Tommy close, knowing that in seconds it would all be over. The greatest minds and strongest warriors in the galaxy had failed to stop this creature. A small group of trapped civilians had no chance at all. The Warbeast took another step forward, and Jake could smell its alien scent like hot metal and electricity. Its eyes, which glowed with an inner fire, looked directly at the Morrison family. It seemed to recognize that Jake was a leader among the humans, and it wanted to make an example of him. But as the creature prepared to strike, something unexpected happened. Tommy stepped forward, out of his parents' protective embrace. The 8-year-old boy looked up at the 12-foot-tall killing machine without fear. The hub fell completely silent, except for the sound of the beast's breathing. Even the emergency alarms seemed to quiet down. Tommy Morrison, who barely came up to the creature's knee, stood between his family and certain death. The Warbeast looked down at the small human child, its glowing eyes showing confusion for the first time since it had started its rampage through the station. The Warbeast stared down at Tommy Morrison with eyes that burned like small stars. The creature had never encountered anything like this small human before. Every other being on the station had shown fear or anger when facing it. This child showed neither. Tommy looked up at the massive alien creature without moving back. His parents tried to reach for him, but something in the boy's calm manner made them stop. Jake and Lisa had seen their son do strange things before. He could make the station's cleaning robots follow him around like pets. He had once calmed a violent Draconis prisoner just by talking to him. But this was different. This was a creature of legend. The beast lowered its 6 arms slightly, tilting its armored head to study the boy. Around the hub, 50,000 beings watched in complete silence. The creature that had torn through their best defenses like they were made of paper was hesitating because of one small human child. Commander Veltar whispered into his communicator, "All units hold position. Do not interfere." The old Corvan warrior had seen many strange things in his long military career, but nothing like this. Tommy reached out his small hand toward the warbeast's massive clawed arm. The creature could have cut the boy in half without effort, but it did not move. Instead, it seemed curious about what the child would do next. "You are angry," Tommy said in his quiet voice, "but you do not know why." The words seemed to hit the beast like a physical blow. It stepped back, its glowing eyes showing something that might have been confusion or even pain. For the first time since escaping from the transport ship, the creature looked uncertain. Lisa Morrison watched her son with growing amazement. As a scientist who studied alien life forms, she knew that Zirithi warbeasts were supposed to be pure, killing machines. They were created by an ancient race to be perfect weapons, without emotion or doubt. Yet this one was showing clear signs of complex thinking and feeling. Tommy walked closer to the beast, ignoring the gasps from the crowd behind. "You were sleeping for a long time," he said. "Now you are awake, but everything is different. The ones who made you are gone." The war beast made a sound that was part growl and part whimper. It was a sound of loss and loneliness that seemed impossible to come from such a fearsome creature. The boy nodded as if he understood perfectly. "You are looking for your pack," Tommy continued, "but they are not here. You are alone." Jake Morrison felt his chest tighten as he watched his son talk to the creature that had just killed dozens of security personnel. But there was something in Tommy's voice that was different from his usual child speech. The boy sounded older, wiser, as if he was speaking from some deep knowledge that even he did not fully understand. The beast slowly lowered itself closer to Tommy's level, bringing its massive head down near the boy. Up close, its armor was even more impressive. The metal plates seemed to be part of its living skin, growing and shifting slightly as the creature moved. Its teeth were longer than Tommy's fingers, sharp enough to bite through starship hull plating. Tommy reached out and touched the beast's armored snout. The crowd gasped, expecting to see the child torn apart. Instead, the warbeast closed its burning eyes and made a sound like a contented rumble. "What is happening here?" asked Dr. Zindai, the station's head scientist, a tall insect-like Manthari with compound eyes that could see in 17 different spectrums of light. Lisa Morrison stepped forward carefully, her scientific mind racing to understand what she was seeing. "I think," she said slowly, "that this creature is not just a weapon. It is a living being with emotions and needs." Commander Veltar lowered his energy rifle. "Our records say that Zirithi warbeasts were created without the ability to feel emotion. They were meant to be perfect killing machines." "Our records might be wrong," Lisa replied, watching her son continue to calm the massive creature. "Or maybe the Zirithi built more into their creations than anyone realized." Tommy stepped back from the beast and looked around at all the aliens watching him. "He does not want to hurt anyone," the boy said. "He is just scared and confused. When you are scared, sometimes you fight even when you do not want to." The war beast stood up to its full height again, but now it seemed different. Its posture was less threatening, more like a large animal that was trying to understand its surroundings. It looked around the hub at all the different species gathered there, its glowing eyes taking in details that it had ignored during its rampage. Dr. Zendai moved closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "The creature's brain activity has changed," he said, reading data from his handheld scanner. "It is showing patterns consistent with higher emotional processing." "Tommy," Jake called softly to his son, "can you ask it to come with us somewhere? Safe?" The boy looked up at the warbeast and spoke in a voice that carried surprising authority for an 8-year-old. "Come," he said simply. A massive creature looked around the hub one more time, then stepped toward Tommy. With each step, the crowd parted to make room for the beast that minutes ago had been their greatest fear. Now it followed the small human boy like a loyal pet dot as they walked. Lisa noticed something strange about the way the other aliens were looking at her family. There was fear, yes, but also something else. Respect, wonder, and in the eyes of some, of the older, wiser species, there was a look of recognition, as if they were seeing something they had been waiting for. Commander Veltar fell into step beside Jake Morrison. "Your son has done something that our greatest warriors and wisest leaders could not do," the Corvan said quietly. "He has tamed a legend." Jake looked back at Tommy, who was walking calmly beside the 12-foot-tall alien killing machine. "I do not think he tamed it," Jake said. "I think he understood it." The group made their way to one of the station's large cargo bays, where the Warbeast would have room to move around without frightening the other residents. As they walked, word of what had happened spread throughout Kepler Station. Aliens who had been hiding in their quarters began to emerge, curious to see the human child who had stopped a rampage with nothing but words. When they reached the cargo bay, Tommy turned to the beast and pointed to a clear area near some storage. "Containers. Stay here," he said. "I will come back to see you soon." The Warbeast looked around the cargo bay, then settled itself into the spot Tommy had indicated. It folded its 6 arms and sat quietly, like a giant guard dog waiting for its master to return dot as the humans left the cargo bay. Lisa looked back at the creature that had terrorized the station. It was watching Tommy through the closing doors, its burning eyes showing something that looked almost like devotion. "What have we gotten ourselves into?" Jake whispered to his wife. Lisa shook her head, still trying to process what she had witnessed. "I do not know," she said, "but I think our lives just became much more complicated." 2 days after Tommy Morrison had calmed the Warbeast, the entire station was still talking about what had happened. Scientists from every species came to study the creature, which the boy had named Rex. The name seemed to fit, since Rex meant king in ancient Earth languages, and this beast was certainly the king of predators. Tommy visited Rex every few hours, bringing the creature food and water. The beast ate standard protein rations, but it seemed to prefer the meals that Tommy brought personally. When the boy was in the cargo bay, Rex would follow him around like an enormous pet. When Tommy left, the creature would sit exactly where. The boy told it to wait. Dr. Lisa Morrison spent her time in the station's main computer center, searching through every database for information about Zirathi Warbeasts. What she found disturbed her more than she wanted to admit to her husband or son. "The historical records are incomplete," she told Commander Veltar during their daily briefing. "But what we do know suggests that these creatures were not just weapons, they were tests." The old Corvan warrior frowned, his blue face showing confusion. "Tests for what?" Lisa pulled up holographic displays showing ancient Zirathi ruins that had been found on dead worlds throughout the galaxy. The Zirathi civilization was incredibly advanced, but they disappeared suddenly about 10,000 years ago. Before they vanished, they left behind clues about something they called the final voice. "What is a final voice?" asked Dr. Zendai, who had joined their meeting to share his own research. "According to the fragments we have translated, the final voice was supposed to be a species that could command their ultimate creations," Lisa explained. "The Zirathi believed that someday, when the galaxy faced its darkest hour, this species would emerge to lead their weapons against some great threat." Commander Veltar was quiet for a long moment. "And you think humans might be this final voice?" Before Lisa could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. The 3 researchers ran to the nearest observation window and looked out into space. A massive fleet of ships was approaching Kepler Station, moving in perfect formation. The ships were unlike anything in the known galactic databases. They were black as space itself, with hulls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their design was both beautiful and terrifying, like predatory fish swimming through the void. Unknown vessels. This is Commander Veltar of Kepler Station. The Corvin leader broadcast on all frequencies. Identify yourselves and state your business. The response came in a voice that sounded like grinding metal mixed with whispers. We are the Void Collective. We have come for the Warbeast and the human child who commands it. Surrender them both, and your station will be spared. Lisa felt her blood turn cold. She had heard rumors about the Void Collective, but most people thought they were just stories told to frighten children. They were supposed to be an ancient enemy that moved through the galaxy like a plague, conquering and enslaving entire civilizations. Jake. She called over the communication system. Get Tommy and meet me in the cargo bay. Now. When the Morrison family gathered around Rex, the Warbeast seemed agitated. The creature was pacing back and forth, making low growling sounds that reverberated through the metal floor. Its 6 arms moved restlessly, and its burning eyes kept looking toward the hull of the station, as if it could see the approaching fleet through solid metal. Tommy walked over to Rex and placed his small hand on the beast's armored leg. What is wrong? He asked Dot. The creature looked down at the boy and made a series of sounds that were almost like speech. Tommy nodded as if he understood perfectly, though the sounds meant nothing to his parents. He says his brothers are waking up, Tommy reported. They are angry and scared because they do not have anyone to tell them what to do. Lisa grabbed her son's shoulders. Tommy, what brothers? Are there more creatures like Rex? The boy closed his eyes and seemed to be listening to something only he could hear. Many brothers, he said quietly. They have been sleeping in the dark ships for a very long time. But now they are awake, and they do not remember who they are supposed to protect. Outside the station, the Void Collective fleet had stopped just beyond weapons range. Their dark ships hung in space like a swarm of metallic insects, waiting for something. Commander Veltar's voice came over the station's communication system. All residents prepare for possible evacuation. We are attempting to negotiate with the Void Collective, but they are demanding we surrender the Morrison family and the Warbeast. Jake pulled his wife and son closer. We are not surrendering anyone to those things, he said firmly. But Tommy was not listening to his father. The boy was staring at Rex with an expression that was far too serious for someone his age. They want to use the Warbeasts to hurt people, he said. That is not what they were made for. Lisa knelt down to Tommy's level. Sweetheart, how do? You know what the Warbeasts were made for? Tommy looked at his mother with eyes that seemed older than his 8 years. Rex tells me things, he said, not with words, with feelings and pictures in my head. The Zirithi made the Warbeasts to protect the galaxy from something terrible. But first, the Warbeasts had to find someone worthy to lead them. And you think that someone is you? Jake asked gently. Tommy shrugged, a gesture that seemed almost comical given the seriousness of the situation. Rex thinks so, he said. And the other Warbeasts are listening to what Rex tells them about me. As if summoned by the boy's words, more alarms began sounding throughout the station. On the view screens in the cargo bay, they could see something happening to the Void Collective fleet. Several of the dark ships were firing their weapons, but not at Kepler Station. They were firing at each other. What is happening out there? Commander Veltar's voice crackled over the communication system. Dr. Zendai's excited voice answered from the Science Center. The Void Collective ships are losing control of something they have on board. I am reading massive energy signatures that match the Warbeast in our cargo bay. They have more of these creatures, and they are breaking free. Tommy walked over too, the largest view screen in the cargo bay, and pressed his small hands against it. Rex moved up behind him. The massive creature's burning eyes also focused on the battle taking place in space. They hurt my brothers, Tommy said, his voice carrying an edge of anger that his parents had never heard before. They kept them in cages and tried to make them into slaves. The boy turned to look at Rex, and something passed between them that was beyond words or telepathy. It was a moment of perfect understanding between two completely different species, bridged by something that ran deeper than language or logic. Rex threw back his massive head and roared. The sound was so loud and so filled with raw power that it shook the entire cargo bay. But this was not the roar of a mindless beast. This was the battle cry of a leader calling his pack to war. The space around Kepler Station erupted into chaos as dozens of warbeasts broke free from the Void collective ships. Tommy Morrison pressed his face against the view screen, watching as creatures identical to Rex tore through the hulls of the dark vessels like they were made of tissue paper. But something was wrong. The freed warbeasts were not just attacking their former captors. They were destroying everything in their path, including civilian ships that had been caught between the station and the Void collective fleet. Their rage was pure and unfocused. The fury of creatures that had been caged and tortured for unknown lengths of time. "They do not know who to fight," Tommy said, his small voice filled with sadness. "They are so angry that they want to hurt everyone." Rex moved closer to the boy and made a low rumbling sound that seemed almost like a question. Tommy looked up at his massive companion and nodded as if he understood perfectly. "Yes," the boy said, "you need to tell them." The warbeast moved too, the center of the cargo bay, and raised all 6 of his arms toward the ceiling. He opened his mouth and released a sound that was unlike anything the Morrison family had ever heard. It was not quite a roar, and not quite a song, but something in between that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure of the station itself. On the view screens, they could see the other warbeasts in space suddenly stop their random destruction. The creatures turned toward Kepler Station as if they could hear Rex's call across the vacuum of space. Incredible! Dr. Zendai's voice came over the communication system. "The creatures are responding to some form of communication that our instruments cannot detect. They are ceasing their attacks on civilian vessels." Tommy walked over to the communication panel in the cargo bay and began adjusting the settings. His parents watched in amazement as their 8-year-old son worked with equipment that most adults found complicated. "Tommy, what are you doing?" Lisa asked. "I need to talk to all of them at the same time," the boy replied, his fingers moving over the controls with surprising skill. "Rex showed me how." Jake Morrison looked at his wife with growing concern. "Lisa, this is getting beyond anything we can handle. Our son is commanding alien weapons of mass destruction." Before Lisa could respond, Tommy activated the station's most powerful communication array. His voice, amplified and broadcast on frequencies that reached every ship in the system, rang out with an authority that seemed impossible from someone so young. "Stop fighting," Tommy commanded. "You are free now. No one will cage you again. But you must not hurt the innocent people who did nothing wrong." The effect was immediate and stunning. Throughout the battle zone, the warbeasts halted their attacks on civilian and medical vessels. Instead, they turned their fury entirely on the Void collective ships that had held them prisoner. But the enemy was not finished. The largest of the dark ships, a massive vessel that dwarfed even Kepler Station, moved forward through the chaos. Its hull opened like a flower, revealing weapons that glowed with sickly green energy. A voice echoed across all frequencies, speaking in words that seemed to burn the air itself. "I am the harbinger of the Void collective. For 1,000 years, we have prepared for this moment. The ancient weapons are awake, but they serve the wrong master. The green energy weapons fired, but not at the warbeasts or Kepler Station. Instead, they targeted the creatures' minds directly, attempting to override Tommy's influence with psychic commands that carried the weight of advanced technology and ancient malice. Several of the warbeasts faltered, their attacks becoming confused and erratic. The Harbinger's mental assault was incredibly powerful, designed to break the will of any creature and bend it to the void. Collective's purposes. Tommy staggered as the psychic attack reached him through his connection to the Warbeasts. Blood began to flow from his nose, and his small body shook with the effort of maintaining his mental link to the creatures. "They are trying to steal my brothers," he gasped, falling to his knees. Rex moved protectively over the boy, using his massive armored body to shield Tommy from the worst of the psychic assault. But even the Warbeast was struggling against the Harbinger's mental domination. Lisa Morrison knelt beside her son, holding him as his body convulsed from the psychic attack. "Tommy, you need to let go. This is too much for you." But the boy shook, his head, determination burning in his young eyes. "If I let go, they will make my brothers into slaves again. I cannot let that happen." Jake Morrison ran to the cargo, Bay's weapon controls, and began targeting the Harbinger ship with the station's defensive systems. But their weapons were designed for protection against pirates and asteroids, not for fighting vessels that could destroy entire worlds. "Commander Veltar," Jake called over the communication system, "we need every weapon this station has focused on the large Void collective ship." "Already working on it," the Corvin commander replied. "But our weapons are barely scratching their hull plating." Tommy struggled to his feet, using Rex's armored leg for support. The connection between boy and beast was stronger than ever, as if the psychic attack had somehow deepened their bond rather than breaking it. "You want to control them," Tommy said, his voice carrying across the communication array to reach the Reich. "Harbinger directly. But they do not belong to you. They never did." The boy placed both of his small hands on Rex's massive head and closed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice seemed to come from somewhere much deeper than his 8-year old throat. "I know what you are," Tommy said to the Harbinger. "You are afraid. You have been afraid for so long that you forgot how to be anything else. You take and take and take because you think it will make you safe, but it never does." The psychic assault from the Harbinger's ship intensified, trying to break Tommy's will through sheer force. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being overwhelmed by the attack, the boy seemed to absorb it and transform it into something else through his connection to Rex. Tommy's influence flowed out to every Warbeast in the system. But now it carried more than just commands. It carried understanding, compassion, and the kind of pack loyalty that had allowed humans to turn wild wolves into faithful dogs. Thousands of years ago, the Warbeasts responded with a coordination that took everyone by surprise. Instead of fighting as individual creatures, they began to move as a single unit. They formed protective formations around the civilian ships, while simultaneously launching coordinated attacks on the Void collective vessels. "Impossible," the Harbinger's voice crackled with static and rage. "These creatures were designed to serve the strongest will. No child should be able to command them." Tommy opened his eyes and looked directly at the image of the Harbinger that appeared on the cargo bay's view screen. The enemy leader was a tall, thin creature covered in mechanical implants that pulsed with the same sickly green light as his ship's weapons. "You are not the strongest," Tommy said simply. "You are just the meanest. There is a difference." The boy turned to Rex and spoke in the same voice of quiet authority that had first stopped the creature's rampage. "Protect everyone," he said. "Show them what you were really made for." Rex looked down at Tommy Morrison and made a sound that was unlike any noise the creature had made before. It was almost musical, like a deep song that resonated through the metal floors and walls of Kepler Station. Throughout space, the other Warbeasts heard that song and added their voices to it. The result was something that no one in the galaxy had heard for 10,000 years. It was the war song of the Zirathi Warbeasts, but it was not a song of destruction or conquest. It was a song of protection, of loyalty. and of creatures who had finally found their true purpose. The Harbinger's ship fired its green energy weapons again, trying to break the mental connection between Tommy and the Warbeasts. But the boy was no longer standing alone against the psychic assault. Every creature in space was sharing the burden, their combined will creating a shield that the Void Collective could not penetrate. This cannot be happening. The Harbinger's voice crackled with electronic fury. The human child is just one small being. How can he command forces that were meant to conquer galaxies? Tommy wiped the blood from his nose and stood straighter. The psychic attack that had been overwhelming him minutes ago now felt manageable, like a strong wind that he could lean into without falling. "Because I do not want to conquer anything," the boy said, his voice carrying clearly across all communication frequencies. "I just want to protect my friends." The Warbeasts moved through space with perfect coordination, their massive forms dancing between the Void Collective ships like deadly ballet performers. But they were not randomly destroying their enemies. Instead, they were surgically dismantling the dark vessels, targeting weapon systems and engines while leaving life support intact. Commander Veltar watched the battle from Kepler Station's bridge, his experienced military mind struggling to understand what he was seeing. "They are giving the Void Collective crews a chance to surrender," he reported in amazement. "These creatures that we thought were mindless killing machines are showing mercy." Dr. Lisa Morrison held her son close as they watched the battle through the cargo bay's view screens. She was proud of Tommy, but also terrified by the power he was displaying. No 8-year-old should be able to command weapons that could destroy planets. "Tommy," she said gently, "how do you know what to tell them to do?" The boy leaned against his mother's side, suddenly looking very young and tired. "Rex shows me pictures in my head," he explained. "Pictures of what the Zirathi wanted their creatures to do. They were not supposed to be weapons for conquest. They were supposed to be guardians." Jake Morrison joined his family, putting his arms around both his wife and son. "Guardians against what?" Before Tommy could answer, something changed in the space battle outside. The Harbinger's massive ship began to retreat, pulling back from the coordinated assault of the Warbeasts. But as it moved, it sent out a signal that made every communication device on Kepler Station scream with feedback. "You have won this battle, human child," the Harbinger's voice echoed through the static. "But this is not over. The Void Collective has been preparing for 1,000 years. We know about the ancient prophecies. We know what is coming." The dark ship accelerated away from Kepler Station, followed by the few Void Collective vessels that were still capable of movement. The Warbeasts let them go, forming a protective formation around the station and the civilian ships that had been caught in the battle. Tommy walked over to the communication panel and spoke to the creatures floating in space around them. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved everyone." The Warbeasts responded with their musical song again, but now it was quieter, more peaceful. One by one, they began to approach Kepler Station, moving slowly to show that they meant no harm. "What do they want?" Commander Veltar asked over the communication system. Tommy closed his eyes and seemed to listen to something only he could hear. "They want to stay," he said. "They do not want to be alone anymore. They want to help protect the people here." Over the next few hours, representatives from every major galactic government arrived at Kepler Station. The news of what had happened spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. A human child had commanded Zirathi Warbeasts, creatures of legend that no one had been able to control for 10,000 years. Ambassador Kretha of the Galactic Council was the first to meet with the Morrison family. The tall, elegant Altarian diplomat looked at Tommy with a mixture of awe and concern. "Young human," she said in her melodic voice, "do you understand what you have done today? You have awakened forces that could change the balance of power in the entire galaxy. Tommy looked up at the ambassador with his serious 8-year-old eyes. "I just helped my friends," he said. "They were scared and hurt, so I showed them they did not have to be scared anymore." Dr. Zindai had been studying the warbeasts through the station's sensors, and his findings were remarkable. "The creature's brain patterns have completely changed," he reported to the gathered officials. "They are no longer showing the aggressive impulses that define their species. Instead, they are displaying pack-bonding behaviors similar to Earth canines." Lisa Morrison spoke up from where she sat beside her son. "The Zirathi must have built more into these creatures than anyone realized. They were not just weapons. They were designed to recognize and bond with a species that could provide them with proper leadership." Commander Veltar nodded slowly. "The ancient records speak of tests," he said. "Perhaps the warbeasts themselves were the test. A way for the Zirathi to identify the species that would be worthy of inheriting their legacy." But Tommy was not paying attention to the political discussions happening around him. He was focused on Rex, who had been allowed into the station's main conference room despite his intimidating size. The creature sat quietly beside the boy's chair, occasionally making soft rumbling sounds that seemed to comfort the child. "The Harbinger said something was coming," Tommy said suddenly, interrupting the adult conversation. "Something that the Zirathi were preparing for when they made the warbeasts." Ambassador Kreetha leaned forward. "What kind of something, child?" Tommy pressed his small hand against Rex's armored side and closed his eyes. "Something from outside our galaxy," he said after a moment. "Something that eats worlds and turns them into nothing but empty space. The Zirathi saw it coming a long time ago, but they knew they could not fight it alone." The room fell silent as the implications of Tommy's words sank in. If the boy was right, then the Void Collective was not the real threat. They were just servants of something much worse, something that was still coming. Dr. Lisa Morrison stood up and walked to the large view screen that showed the space around Kepler Station. Dozens of warbeasts floated peacefully among the civilian ships, their presence somehow reassuring rather than threatening. "If that is true," she said quietly, "then maybe the Zirathi knew exactly what they were doing when they created these creatures. They were not building weapons for conquest. They were building guardians for a war that had not started yet." Tommy opened his eyes and looked around at all the adults who were staring at him with expressions of worry and wonder. "I do not want to fight a war," he said. "I just want to take care of my friends and make sure everyone is safe." Rex made a low rumbling sound and gently touched the boy's shoulder with one massive clawed hand. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, like a protective older brother reassuring a younger sibling. "Ambassador," Kreetha stood up and bowed formally to Tommy Morrison. "On behalf of the Galactic Council, I hereby recognize you as the first human guardian of the Zirathi legacy," she announced, "with all the rights and responsibilities that title carries." Tommy looked confused. "What does that mean?" Jake Morrison put his hand on his son's shoulder. "It means," he said gently, "that you have become very important to a lot of people. And it means our quiet life on Kepler Station just ended." But Tommy was not worried about the future. He looked up at Rex, who looked back at him with eyes that burned like friendly stars. The boy smiled and reached up to pat the creature's armored snout. "It is okay," he said, speaking to both the warbeast and the concerned adults around him. "We will figure it out together. That is what families do." Outside the conference room windows, the warbeasts continued their patient vigil around Kepler Station. They had waited 10,000 years to find their purpose. Now they had found it in the form of a small human boy who understood that the greatest strength was not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to protect. And somewhere in the deep darkness between galaxies, ancient enemies stirred and began their long journey toward a galaxy that now had guardians waiting for them. The real war was still coming, but for the first time in 10 millennia, the galaxy would not face it alone.